I'd perfected the art of being alone in a crowded room at 28. I'd attended enough gallery openings, networking events, and obligatory social gatherings to know exactly how to appear engaged while remaining emotionally unavailable. Smile at the right moments, laugh at mediocre jokes, ask questions that keep the conversation on the other person. It was a performance I'd mastered. It's one that kept me safe from the messy complications of genuine connection. The gallery opening that October evening should have been no different. My best friend Sage had insisted I come. They'd been worried about me. Using words like isolated and closed off with increasing frequency. To appease them, I'd shown up wearing my favorite navy blazer and the expression of someone who definitely wanted to be there. The gallery specialized in contemporary queer art, and the featured collection explored themes of identity and belonging. Vibrant canvases lined the exposed brick walls, each piece more emotionally raw than the last. I found myself drawn to a particular painting of figures standing at the intersection of two paths, their shadows splitting in opposite directions. Something about the loneliness of that image resonated in my chest. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice came from beside me, warm, with a slight rasp that suggested either a long day or a natural huskiness. I turned, prepared to deliver my standard polite but distant response, and found myself looking into the most disarmingly genuine brown eyes I'd ever seen. He was tall, maybe 6'1" to my 5'10", with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges and a beard trimmed close to his jaw. He wore a simple white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, and there was actual paint smudged on his left wrist. Something about him felt unguarded in a way that immediately put me on edge. It is, I managed, redirecting my attention to the painting. Safer there. The artist is exploring the concept of chosen paths versus destined ones, he continued, stepping closer to examine the brushwork. The question of whether we're running toward something or away from something else entirely. I felt my defenses activate. Deep conversations with strangers at gallery openings were not part of my protocol. That's one interpretation. He laughed not mockingly, but with a kind of gentle amusement that suggested he'd caught my deflection and found it more interesting than off-putting. You're right. I'm projecting. I do that. He extended his hand. I'm Elias. I stared at his outstretched hand for a beat too long, noting the paint stains, the calluses that suggested actual physical work. The simple silver ring on his right thumb. Everything about the gesture felt too open, too vulnerable. But Sage was watching from across the room with that pointed look they gave me when I was being emotionally constipated, so I took his hand. Adrian. His grip was firm and warm, and he held on just a moment longer than conventional handshakes required, not inappropriately, but enough that I felt something shift in my carefully maintained composure. When he released my hand, I felt the absence of his touch like a question I hadn't known I was asking. Well, Adrian, Elias said, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. Since we're both standing here pretending to be cultured and sophisticated, want to grab some of that mediocre wine and be honest about which pieces we actually like. I should have said no. Should have made an excuse, found Sage, maintained my careful distance. Instead, I found myself saying, the wine is terrible. The worst, he agreed cheerfully. And most of these people are more interested in being seen than actually seeing the art. Absolutely true. But that piece in the corner, that one with the fractured mirror, that one's devastating in the best way. His smile widened, and something in my chest did an uncomfortable flip. Show me. We spent the next hour moving through the gallery, our terrible wine forgotten on a windowsill. Elias had opinions, strong ones, but he delivered them with a curiosity that invited discussion rather than debate. He asked what I saw in each piece before sharing his own interpretation, and when we disagreed, he leaned in with genuine interest rather than dismissing my perspective. It was unsettling. I wasn't used to being seen, really seen by someone I'd just met. So what do? Elias asked, as we stood before a sculpture made of reclaimed wood and copper wire, two figures reaching for each other across an unbridgeable gap. I'm an architect, I said, falling back on the professional summary I'd perfected. Commercial spaces, mostly. Nothing as interesting as this. I doubt that. He tilted his head, studying me with the same intensity he'd given the artwork. Buildings shape how people move through the world. That's pretty significant. And you? Are you an artist? I gestured to the paint on his wrist. He glanced down as if noticing it for the first time, then laughed. Technically, yes. Realistically, I'm a high school art teacher who paints in my garage on weekends. Far less romantic than it sounds. I don't know, I heard myself say. Teaching art to teenagers seems pretty romantic to me. In the classical sense, hopeful. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes that made him look younger and older all at once. Most people think I'm crazy. Teaching is the practical job. The painting is the pipe dream. Most people are wrong about a lot of things. Are they wrong about you, Adrian? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through my carefully maintained calm. I opened my mouth to deflect, to redirect, to do what I always did when conversations ventured too close to genuine territory, but Elias was looking at me with such openness, such uncomplicated interest, that I found myself saying, probably. I'm generally not as put together as I appear. Good, he said simply. Put together is boring. Before I could process that response, Sage appeared at my elbow, vibrating with barely contained excitement. Adrian, there you are. I've been looking everywhere, oh. They stopped short, their eyes darting between Elias and me with unmistakable glee. Hi, I'm Sage, Adrian's best friend, and the person who dragged him here tonight against his will. Not entirely against my will. I protested weakly. Elias, he said, shaking Sage's hand with the same genuine warmth he'd shown me. I'm the guy who's been monopolizing your friend's evening. Monopolize away, Sage said, their smile knowing. Adrian needs more monopolizing in his life. Less hermiting. I'm standing right here, I muttered. Sweetie. Sage patted my arm with exaggerated sympathy before turning back to Elias. A group of us are heading to the bar down the street. You should come. Both of you, they added, as if I might try to escape. I fully intended to make excuses. But Elias was looking at me with a question in his eyes, not pressure, just genuine curiosity about what I wanted. It was such a foreign experience being given the choice without judgment attached to either answer that I found myself nodding. Sure, I said, as surprised by my own response as Sage was. Why not? The bar was crowded and loud, filled with the post-gallery crowd and neighborhood regulars. Our group claimed a corner. And somehow, through the organic chaos of people claiming seats, I ended up on a worn leather couch with Elias beside me, our thighs nearly touching in the cramped space. The conversation flowed around USH holding court with stories that grew more animated with each drink. Others debating the merits of the exhibited pieces. Elias participated easily, but I noticed he kept gravitating back to me, asking quiet questions beneath the larger conversation. How long have you and Sage been friends? Since college? They're the person who knows me best in the world and still chooses to stick around. That says good things about both of you, or it says Sage has questionable judgment. He smiled, and I felt it in my chest like a physical thing. I'm going with the first option. Someone jostled past us, and Elias shifted closer to make room. The movement brought our shoulders into contact. I became hyper-aware of every point where our bodies touched shoulder to shoulder, arm to arm. He didn't pull away, and neither did I. Can I ask you something? Elias's voice was low enough that only I could hear it beneath the bar noise. My heart kicked into a faster rhythm. Sure, earlier when I asked if people were wrong about you, you got this look, like you were deciding whether to run. His eyes searched mine, but there was no judgment in them, only curiosity. Do you run a lot, Adrian? The question should have felt invasive. It should have triggered every defense mechanism I'd spent years developing. Instead, it felt like relief, like someone had finally asked the question I'd been avoiding asking myself. Yes, I admitted, the word barely audible. I run a lot. From what? Getting hurt. Being disappointed. Disappointing someone else. I paused, surprised by my own honesty. From feeling too much, I guess? Elias was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. That sounds exhausting. "It is," I said, and realized I'd never acknowledged that out loud before. He shifted, and suddenly his hand was resting on the couch between us, palm upon, offering not a demand. "What if you didn't? Just for tonight. What if you didn't run?" I stared at his hand, at the paint-stained fingers and the calluses and the simple silver ring. Everything in me screamed to make a joke, to deflect, to protect myself from whatever this moment was becoming. But I was tired. Tired of running, tired of being alone in crowded rooms, tired of the walls I'd built becoming a prison, so I did something I never did. I took a risk. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine. Warm and solid and real, and something in my chest cracked open, not breaking, but blooming. The noise of the bar faded, and all I could feel was the pressure of his thumb stroking gently across my knuckles. The way his hand held mine with a careful confidence that suggested he understood exactly how significant this moment was. "Hi," he said softly, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Hi," I whispered back, and felt something like hope unfurl in my chest for the first time in years. I woke up the next morning with Ilias's number saved in my phone and a text message waiting. "Good morning. Last night was unexpected in the best way. Coffee this week." I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every instinct told me to wait, to play it cool, to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. But I remembered the feeling of his hand in mine, the way something had shifted in my chest when he'd smiled at me, and I typed back, "Tomorrow? There's a place near my office. Rowan and Brew, 10 a.m. His response came immediately. "Perfect. It's a date." A date. The word sent a spike of anxiety through me, but underneath it was something else. Anticipation. Maybe, or the faint, terrifying whisper of excitement. Sage called that afternoon, their voice gleeful. "So, Elias, don't start." "Oh, I'm absolutely starting." "Adrian," you held his hand. "In public, for like an hour. Do you understand how monumentally out of character that is for you?" I did. That was precisely what terrified me. It just happened. The best things usually do. Sage's voice softened. "I saw how he looked at you, babe. Like you were the only person in the room. When's the last time someone looked at you like that?" "Never," I wanted to say. No one had ever looked at me the way Elias had, with that combination of interest and patience. Like he could see all my broken pieces and found them interesting rather than defective. "We're having coffee tomorrow," I admitted. Sage squealed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "This is happening. Adrian Pierce is going on an actual date with an actual human who seems actually wonderful. I need to document this moment. Goodbye, Sage," or the Blue Henley. "It makes your eyes look—" I hung up. But I was smiling despite myself. Rowan and Brew was one of those aggressively hipster coffee shops with exposed brick, mismatched furniture, and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. I arrived 10 minutes early, anxious energy making me restless, and ordered a black coffee I didn't really want just to have something to do with my hands. Elias walked in exactly at 10. My breath caught. In the daylight streaming through the front windows, he was even more striking than I'd remembered, wearing jeans and a dark green sweater that brought out the warmth in his brown eyes. His hair slightly disheveled in a way that suggested he'd run his hands through it. Nervously, before coming inside, he spotted me and smiled, and I felt that now familiar flip in my chest. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You found the most hipster coffee shop in a 5-mile radius. I'm impressed. I have a refined sense of overpriced beverages and artisanal pastries." He laughed, and just like that, the nervousness in my chest eased. We fell into conversation as easily as we had at the gallery, talking about everything and nothing. The kind of rambling discussion that happens when two people are genuinely interested in each other's thoughts. He told me about his students, about the kid who'd been struggling with depression until he discovered painting as an outlet. I told him about my latest project, a community center I was designing that needed to serve multiple purposes within limited space. He asked questions that showed he was actually listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. An hour passed, then 2. The coffee shop filled and emptied around us, but we stayed, our cups long empty, neither of us ready for the conversation to end. "Can I ask you something?" Elias leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Last night, you said you run from getting hurt. What happened?" I should have deflected. Should have kept my walls up. But something about the way he asked with genuine care rather than morbid curiosity made me want to tell the truth. "His name was Marcus," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "We dated for 3 years. I thought we were building something real. A life together." I traced the rim of my empty cup, not quite meeting Elias's eyes. Turns out, he'd been building something real with someone else. For most of the last year we were together, Adrian. Elise's voice was soft with understanding. "I'm sorry. Worst part wasn't even the cheating," I continued, the words spilling out now that I'd started. "It was realizing how much of myself I'd made small to fit into what he wanted. I'd convinced myself that being chosen was enough, that I should be grateful someone wanted me, even if they didn't really see me." Elias was quiet for a moment, and when I finally looked up, his expression was intense. He was an idiot. "You don't know that? You don't know me. I know that you're brilliant and guarded, and you see beauty in fractured things. I know that when you talk about architecture, your whole face lights up. I know that you're kind to bartenders and you listen when people talk, and you held my hand last night even though I could tell it scared you." He reached across the table, his hand open and offering. "I know enough to know that anyone who couldn't see all of that wasn't looking properly." My throat felt tight. "You barely know me. Then let me know you better." His eyes held mine. "I'm not him, Adrian. I'm not going to make you small." I wanted to believe him. Wanted it with an intensity that terrified me. But wanting and trusting were different things, and I'd learned the hard way that trust required more than good intentions. "I'm not good at this," I said finally. "At opening up? At being vulnerable? I've gotten really good at being alone." "Being alone isn't the same as being okay," Elias said gently. "And for what it's worth, you don't seem like someone who wants to be alone. You seem like someone who's scared of wanting not to be." The accuracy of that statement stole my breath. So what if I disappoint you? The question came out smaller than I intended. What if I'm not enough? Elias stood, moving around the table to sit beside me in the booth. He didn't touch me, but his proximity was a comfort. "Adrian. I'm a high school art teacher who lives in a studio apartment with a cat named Splotch and drinks grocery store wine. I paint in my garage because I can't afford a real studio. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for real. Real is messy. Good. I like messy." He paused, then slowly reached for my hand where it rested on the table. "Tell me to stop if this isn't okay." I didn't tell him to stop. Instead, I turned my hand over, palm up, and felt his fingers lace through mine. "I don't have this figured out," I admitted. "I don't know how to do this. Whatever this is." "Neither do I," Elias said. "But maybe we can be messy and confused together, one day at a time." I looked at our joined hands, at the way his thumb was tracing gentle circles on my skin, and felt something in me begin to soften. "One day at a time," I repeated. "So," his eyes crinkled with that smile I was already growing addicted to. "Same time tomorrow?" Tomorrow became the day after, which became a week of coffee dates that stretched into lunch, then dinner. Elias texted me good morning and good night, shared pictures of his students' artwork, sent me links to architectural projects he thought I'd find interesting. He was attentive without being overwhelming, interested without being invasive, and slowly, carefully, I started letting him in. I told him about my family, the well-meaning but emotionally distant parents, who'd never quite known what to do with a gay son. The younger sister who'd moved across the country and called twice a year. He told me about his own fractured family history, the father who'd left when he was 12, the mother who'd worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. "She's the reason I teach," he said over Thai food one evening. "She always said that art saved her during the hard times, gave her a way to process everything she couldn't say out loud. I wanted to give other kids that same outlet." The more I learned about Elias, the more I understood that his openness wasn't naivety, it was a choice. He'd been hurt before, had his own scars, but he decided that vulnerability was worth the risk. I was still learning that lesson. 2 weeks after the gallery opening, I invited him to my apartment for the first time. It was a carefully curated space modern minimalist. Everything in its place, safe, controlled. Elias walked in, looked around and said, "This is very you. Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." He moved to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "It's beautiful, but it doesn't feel lived in. I live here." He turned, and his expression was gentle. "Do you? Or do you just exist here?" The question hit harder than it should have. Before I could formulate a response, the sky opened up one of those sudden autumn storms that turns the world gray and soft. Rain hammered against the windows, and thunder rumbled in the distance. "I should probably go," Elias said, but he didn't move toward the door. "You could stay," I heard myself say, "until the storm passes." Something shifted in his expression, a question, an understanding, a recognition of what I was really offering. "Are you sure?" "No, yes. Maybe I didn't know anything except that I didn't want him to leave. Didn't want to spend another evening alone in my carefully controlled apartment. Pretending that I wasn't lonely." "Stay," I said. More firmly this time. We ended up on my couch. The city lights blurred beyond the rain-streaked windows, talking as the storm raged outside. The conversation drifted deeper to fears and dreams and the complicated messinesses of being human. "I'm afraid I'm going to mess this up," I admitted as lightning flickered across the sky. "That I'm going to run when things get real." "Then I'll wait," Elias said simply. "And when you come back, because I think you will, I'll still be here? How can you be so sure?" He shifted closer, his hand finding mine in the space between us. "Because I've been where you are." After my last relationship ended, I spent 2 years convinced I was better off alone. Safer that way. Less risk of getting hurt again. What changed? I realized that being safe and being happy aren't the same thing. His eyes searched mine. I was safe, sure, but I was also half alive, going through motions. And one day I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person looking back. I knew exactly what he meant. I'd been that person for 3 years. "I'm terrified," I whispered. "Me too," he admitted. "But I'm also hopeful, and I haven't felt hopeful in a long time." The rain softened to a steady drum against the windows. Elias's hand was warm in mine, his presence solid and real beside me. And in that moment, in my too-perfect apartment, with this beautifully imperfect man, I made a decision. I leaned in. The kiss was soft, at first tentative, questioning. Elias's hand came up to cup my jaw, his thumb brushing my cheekbone, with a tenderness that made my chest ache. I melted into him, my hands finding his waist, pulling him closer. When we finally broke apart, breathless, his forehead rested against mine. "Stay," I said again. But this time, the word meant something different. Not just until the storm passes. Stay. "Adrian, I know it's fast. I know I'm scared. But I'm tired of running, and I don't want to run from this." From you, I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Stay." His smile was radiant. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll stay." Adrian stopped running, but learning to stand still to build something real would be the hardest part. In the final chapter, love deepens, old wounds resurface, and Adrian must choose between the safety of his walls and the terrifying beauty of an open heart. Elias didn't just stay that rainy night. He wove himself into my life with a gentleness that never felt invasive. His art supplies gradually appeared in my spare room. His coffee mug claimed a spot in my cabinet. Splotch, his ridiculously affectionate tabby cat, took up residence on my couch like he'd always belonged there. My minimalist apartment started to feel lived in. We fell into rhythms. Morning coffee before work. Evenings spent with him painting while I sketched building designs. Weekends exploring the city or staying in. He introduced me to his friends, a warm and chaotic group of teachers and artists who welcomed me without reservation. I brought him to dinner with Sage, who pulled me aside afterward and said, "If you let this one go, I'm staging an intervention. I had no intention of letting him go. For the first time in years, I was happy genuinely. It's terrifyingly happy. But happiness, I was learning, required vulnerability. And vulnerability meant risk. It happened on a Thursday evening in late November. I was working late at the office, finalizing designs for the community center, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, Adrian. It's Marcus. I heard through mutual friends that you're doing well. I'm in town this weekend. Think we could grab coffee? I'd like to talk." I stared at the message, my chest tightening with a familiar anxiety. 3 years since he'd destroyed me, and he wanted coffee. As if it were that simple. As if we could just be cordial acquaintances who happened to share a painful history. I should have deleted the message. Should have blocked the number and moved on. But some self-destructive part of me needed to know what he wanted, needed to face that part of my past. I'd spent so long running from. I texted back, "Saturday, 2 p.m., Rowan and Brew." When I got home that night, Elias was already there. He's making dinner in my kitchen with Splotch supervising from the counter. The domesticity of the scene made my heart ache. "Hey," he said, smiling when he saw me. "Bad day?" Something like that. Set my bag down, suddenly exhausted. Marcus texted me. Elias went very still, the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables frozen midair. "Your ex, Marcus?" "Yeah, he wants to meet for coffee this weekend." You said yes. It wasn't a question. I nodded, defensive, without meaning to be. I need closure. I need to face that part of my past, instead of running from it, okay? Elias set down the knife, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Do you want me to come with you?" The offer surprised me. "You'd do that?" "Of course I would. I'm not threatened by your past, Adrian. But I also won't pretend I'm thrilled about you meeting with someone who hurt you." He moved closer, his expression serious. "I trust you." But I don't trust him. Something in my chest loosened. Marcus had always been jealous, possessive, quick to accuse me of having ulterior motives. Elias's trust, his willingness to support me even when he was uncomfortable, was such a stark contrast that it made me realize how unhealthy my previous relationship had truly been. "I think I need to do this alone," I said. "But thank you for offering." He pulled me into a hug and I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the paint and coffee smell that had become synonymous with safety. "Just promise me something," he murmured against my hair. "What?" "Don't let him make you forget who you are. The Adrian I know, one who's brilliant and kind and learning to be brave, he's worth protecting." Saturday came too quickly. I arrived at Rowan and Brew 15 minutes early, my nerves jangling, second-guessing my decision to come at all. Marcus arrived exactly on time, looking every bit the polished corporate lawyer he'd become. Expensive suit, perfect hair, the confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. Adrian. He smiled, reaching out for a handshake that felt performative. "Thanks for meeting me. What do you want, Marcus?" I didn't sit down, didn't order coffee. I just wanted this over with. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize. For how things ended. For everything. "You cheated on me for a year." Everything is a pretty broad term. I know. And I'm sorry. I was confused. Dealing with my own issues don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't make excuses. You made choices. Choices that hurt me. Choices that made me question my worth for years afterward. Marcus flinched. "You're right. I heard you were seeing someone new, and I wanted you to know that I regret what I did. That you deserved better." And there it was, the real reason for this meeting. He'd heard about Elias. He wanted to assuage his guilt, to convince himself he wasn't the villain in our story. "You're right," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. I did deserve better. I deserved someone who saw me, who valued me, who didn't make me feel like I had to shrink myself to be loved. I met his eyes, and I found that. "So, thank you for the apology, but I don't need your closure. I've already moved on." I turned to leave, but Marcus's voice stopped me. "He's lucky, whoever he is." I looked back. No, I'm lucky. I'm lucky I learned that being alone was better than being with someone who made me feel alone. And I'm lucky I found someone who knows the difference between possession and love. I went straight to Ilias's apartment, my heart pounding, needing to see him with an urgency that surprised me. He opened the door in sweatpants and a paint-stained t-shirt, concern immediate in his eyes. That was fast. Are you okay? I stepped inside, closed the door, kissed him, pouring 3 years of healing and 2 months of falling in love and the crystal-clear certainty that this was real into that kiss. When we broke apart, breathless, he cupped my face in his paint-stained hands. What happened? I told him the truth, that I'd moved on, that I found someone who actually sees me. I pressed my forehead to his, that I'm in love with you. Ilias went very still. Say that again? I'm in love with you, I repeated, the words coming easier the second time. I know it's only been 2 months. I know I'm probably supposed to wait longer before saying it. But I'm tired of running, and I'm tired of being afraid, and I love you. You. With your terrible grocery store wine, and your paint-stained hands, and the way you make my too-perfect apartment feel like a home. His smile was incandescent. I love you too. I've loved you since you held my hand in that bar and looked terrified and brave all at once. We stood there in his doorway, holding each other, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The kind that comes from being fully known and fully accepted. The kind that doesn't require walls or defenses or carefully maintained distance. Move in with me, I said suddenly. Or let me move in here. I don't care which. I just don't want to sleep without you anymore. Adrian Pierce, are you asking me to live with you? I'm asking you to build a life with me. One that's messy and imperfect and real. Then yes, he said, pulling me closer. 1,000 times, yes. The community center opened in May to a crowd of neighborhood families and local press. I stood at the back, watching people explore the space I'd designed, the multipurpose rooms, the natural light, the accessibility features I'd fought to include. Elias found me there, slipping his hand into mine with the easy familiarity that had become second nature. It's incredible, he whispered. You should be proud. I am, and I was. But not just of the building. I was proud of myself for facing my fears, for learning to trust again, for building something that mattered. Hey, Elias said, tugging me toward a quieter corner. I have something for you. He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of a painting, 2 figures, their hands joined, standing at an intersection. One path led into darkness, the other into light. But the figures were walking forward together, their shadows merging into one. It's us, I said, my throat tight. It's us, he confirmed. The night we met, you were standing in front of that painting, the one about chosen, continue, 509, empaths, and destiny. I wanted to paint my answer to that question. He pocketed his phone, both hands coming up to frame my face. You're my chosen path, Adrian. And my destiny. Every version of the future I want has you in it. I kissed him there, in the community center I'd built, surrounded by the sound of laughter and life. When we pulled apart, I whispered against his lips, marry me. Elias pulled back, eyes wide. What? Marry me, I repeated, more certain than I'd ever been of anything. I don't have a ring. I didn't plan this. But I'm standing in this building that represents everything I can create when I'm not afraid. And I'm holding the hand of the man who taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the only way to truly live. So marry me, please. His laugh was half sob, his eyes bright with tears. You're insane. We've only been together 8 months. I know. Is that a no? It's a yes, you ridiculous romantic. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. I kissed him again, and around us, people began to notice, to cheer, to clap. Sage appeared from somewhere, phone out, documenting the moment with tears streaming down their face. Elise's artist friends whooped and hollered. Even Splotch, who Elias had somehow smuggled into the event, meowed his approval from a nearby chair. Later, after the crowd had dispersed and we were walking home through the warm May evening, our hands still joined, I thought about that painting from the gallery, the figure at the intersection, trying to choose between paths. I'd spent so long standing at that intersection, paralyzed by fear of choosing wrong. But Elias had shown me that the paths didn't matter as much as the person walking beside you. That home wasn't a place, it was a hand in yours. A shared heartbeat, the courage to be fully messily, beautifully yourself with another person. He'd held my hand that first night. A simple gesture that had changed everything, and my heart had followed, leading me home at last. The wedding was small, just close friends and chosen family in a garden full of spring blooms. I wore the blue Henley Sage had insisted made my eyes look amazing under a perfectly tailored suit, of course. Elias wore paint-stained Converse with his tuxedo, because some things never change. When we exchanged vows, I told him about the man I'd been a year ago, the one who'd perfected the art of being alone in crowded rooms. And I told him about the man I'd become, the one who'd learned that the most important architecture isn't buildings, but the spaces we create in our lives for love to grow. You held my hand, I said, my voice steady despite the tears on my face, and my heart followed. Thank you for being patient while I learned to be brave. Thank you for showing me that love isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. I choose you, Elias. Every day, every version of the future. I choose you. When we kissed as married men, our friends and family cheering around us, I felt that same feeling I'd had the first night in the bar, like something in my chest was blooming, unfurling, coming to life after years of dormancy. Later, during the reception, Sage cornered me with champagne and happy tears. Remember when you were emotionally constipated and refused to go to gallery openings? I remember you being pushy and invasive, I said, pulling them into a hug. Thank you for being pushy and invasive. That's what best friends are for. They pulled back, studying my face with satisfaction. You're happy. Really, truly happy. I looked across the garden to where Elias was laughing with his students, paint-stained hands gesturing animatedly as he told some story. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up, and his smile, that smile I'd spent a year falling more in love with, was just for me. Yeah, I said. My own smile so wide my face hurt. I really, truly am. That night, as Elias and I slow danced under string lights with Splotch supervising from a nearby table, he leaned in and whispered, "No regrets?" I thought about the Adrian from a year ago, afraid, closed off, convinced that safety was more important than connection. I thought about all the moments since then, the rainy afternoon when I'd asked him to stay, the night I'd faced Marcus and chosen my own healing, the spontaneous proposal in a community center full of light. Not a single one, I whispered back. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to, I said, and knew it was true. The timing had been perfect, not because it was easy, but because we'd both been ready. Ready to be brave, to be vulnerable, to build something real. As we swayed together, my husband's hand warm in mine, I sent a silent thank you to my past self, the one who'd been terrified but had held Elias's hand anyway. That one small act of courage had changed everything. They say you remember the exact moment your life changes forever. Mine changed on a Tuesday afternoon in October when someone held my hand. Just that. A hand in mine, but that single gesture unraveled my carefully constructed world and rebuilt it into something more beautiful than I'd ever imagined. Possible a life full of paint-stained hands and terrible grocery store wine, of laughter and art and the kind of love that doesn't require walls. A life where I was finally, gloriously, completely home.